Welcome to the Hard But Worth It podcast, where we explore the leader's journey. I'm Kirk.
I'm Mitch.
And on this episode, we're going to ask the question, why is it so hard to make some decisions? What does this question mean to you?
Yeah. Are you asking me to make a decision right now?
Mitch, we need to talk.
That's right. We were kind of playing around with this thought, and we thought maybe we talk about this in an episode.
We both walked through a few circumstances recently that carried this hard decision, and it was hard.
Yeah, and we came up with a few things. I mean, I'm sure there are more reasons why decisions can be hard. Mm-hmm. But we came up with just three things, and then we kind of talked through them. But one was just the stakes are high.
Yeah.
I think there are times where the decision that needs to be made, the stakes are high. Mm-hmm. And if you're a P on the or on the Myers-Briggs, if you're like an ENTP like me, then the stakes being high might mean that it's harder to make that decision.
Harder to make that
decision, right?
What do you mean by high stakes? What kind of things make stakes high?
I think like if you're in your business or organization, things that might affect your revenue, your profit, your profitability, or decisions around your solvency as a company. There's times where you may have to make a decision to leverage for an opportunity that's coming your way, but that there's risk. So risk tolerance.
Yeah, there's a risk feature to this.
Connected
stakes,
to that.
Right? Risk introduces the notion of failure.
Yeah.
And there's some decisions that I need to make where if I make the wrong decision, the consequences aren't that big a deal.
Right.
It's like, because failure is not really on the table.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're making one, you're like, okay.
Yeah. And I think as you get successful in your business, or you move down a path where you've seen some success, kind of now looking back, I don't think you take it for granted, especially if you've been kind of in it for a bit, you have a little bit of experience. You don't take that for granted that somehow just because you've been successful in the past, you're going to be as successful moving forward. So there's a calculation piece to that where you're trying to really navigate that and make the right decision if the stakes are high.
Yeah. I think we often find ourselves in another scenario where the stakes feel high, but they're actually not.
Right.
And learning how to differentiate that is really important. And I work with clients regularly where they will say things as though the stakes are really high, as though the survival is at stake, or like that. And when you really break it down, you're like, actually, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And I understand you're scared. I understand that there's fear involved, but we have to build a resiliency to understanding how to dance with our fears, kind of the language we use, because there are some things that feel scary, but we actually need to lean into them. And then there's some things that actually are scary.
Correct.
And those are the high stakes moments where it's like, okay, slow down, really look at it, and those are harder decisions to make.
Right. And I think when you study any type of leadership process or framework, this isn't a new thought, but it's true that we sometimes forget, and that is there are usually higher stakes in the indecision than there are in making the decision, right? More is lost in indecision than making the wrong decision. And so I think that too, we tend to size things up and go, well, this is a high stakes decision, without considering the fact, well, if I don't make a decision, the stakes are actually higher.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that we were thinking about when we've both walked through circumstances where the decision, I always think of them as heavy, carrying this decision, because you got to carry it around a while you're making it, and it just is heavy and it's exhausting to make. These are the kinds of things that we're calling these hard decisions, right? So the first one, those things felt to us like, oh yeah, the stakes were high, and they really were. The second thing we realized is, well, there's people involved. And, the bigger your company gets, the more bigger teams you have, the more people are involved. And when people get involved, it gets harder sometimes because you have to start making decisions that are going to affect people's lives. It can be a little lower stakes one, like, do I give the promotion to this person or this person, when maybe they're both great, but you have to give it to one of them. And that means someone isn't going to get it. And possibly might not be up for a promotion for a few more years because of how the company org chart works.
Right.
So you might actually be losing that person if they want to promote in their career when you make this decision, right?
Yeah.
So, but those are opportunity-oriented things. But it's also true that when you have to shut down a department or lose a product line or end a relationship with a big client, that people are going to get laid off.
Yeah. Well, I think the thought that is said often, but we know it's not true, is that, it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's just business.
Yeah.
But it really is personal. Good business is personal. And that's what makes these types of decisions hard. The people, hopefully, that you have running on your team over time that are contributing are becoming more than just an employee. You're getting to know them. They become a friend. Maybe some would even say they're like family to you, another type of family. And so those decisions around people have a greater impact. Like you're talking, it spills over into their livelihood.
Yep.
What does that mean for them if this department shuts down? And what we also know is we don't always rewrite a role or create a new seat around a person just because this role ended.
Right.
Because that doesn't serve the company well always to just write a new role around a person that doesn't necessarily belong there.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's the hard talk of, hey, the journey's ending. This is an off-ramp. And you say goodbye. And man, those are hard.
It's just hard. I think it's supposed to be hard, right? If that isn't hard for you, you might not be leading well. And we get cold and callous maybe, or we get too calculating, and it's an attempt to protect ourselves from feeling the magnitude of what's actually happening. I actually, I can't control clients, but I work as hard as I can to disallow the language. It's not personal, it's just business.
Right.
That puts business in such a toxic, corrupt world. It's like now, just because it's business, you're allowed to do something and not feel it.
Yeah.
That is not healthy for anybody involved.
No. The times where it's hard with people too is when things have just changed.
Right.
And you have the right person because they're connecting with your values. They've got the right culture. But somewhere along the way, the seat has changed. And you're not necessarily ready to dissolve the position, but they have grown as far as they're going to grow in the position, but the company is outgrowing them. The position is outgrowing them. Yeah. So you got this person who's a legacy employee. They're embedded in your company. I mean, they've gotten you to where you are, but they're not going to be the quarterback who's going to get you to where you need to go. Yeah. That becomes even difficult too, because it's one thing to have the talk to go, this department dissolved is a corporate decision. It was for the best of the company. It's still a hard conversation, but it's like it had to happen. This is one where you're not the right person anymore.
And you were.
Well,
yeah. I agree. Those are just really hard decisions. And I had someone this week actually say they haven't had an employee. Tell me a story from the past, and they hired their friend, and they brought their friend in, and it was their best friend, but their best friend didn't work out in the position. Turns out they weren't very good at the position,
right.
And they didn't understand that they had created a dual relationship. And so the language they were saying, they tell me all the reasons why they weren't working out in the position, and they didn't. But they couldn't use the words. What they would say is, but I really like this person. And I was like, time out. Let me explain dual relationships. You like this person as a friend. Everything you're telling me tells me you absolutely don't like them as a fill in the blank. And we have to be honest about that.
Yeah.
I actually don't like your work product.
Right.
It's not you, but this isn't working. Over here, it still works. And we get those things blended together in a way where the decision gets too heavy. If I have to remove you from this position that you're not any good at, and that's going to cause me to lose you as my cousin, my brother, my friend, my whatever, well, you can't almost make that decision. So you end up keeping them in your world because you don't want to lose them as a friend.
Right.
And we have to learn how to pull those
Yeah.
apart, because what's happened in this particular case, the person was doing such bad work that their customers were coming in and saying, "Oh, I don't want them touching my thing. Keep them off my project." Okay, so we don't care about our customers now?
Yeah, that's right.
That's not okay.
Not
right?
okay.
So it is personal. And the more personal it becomes, in some cases, well, not in some cases, the more personal it becomes, it can be better for us as long as that's working. But then we have to do this. All of a sudden, it feels like it's backfiring on us. It is personal.
Yeah.
I'll often, we have to fire someone. I teach, sometimes you teach a young entrepreneur how to fire someone, because I never imagined that. They were just going to hire all their buddies and hire people they want to have beers with and then hang out and it's going to be great. And it's like, no. Now I have to learn how to fire somebody. And they say, well, how did I do that well? And I'm like, I don't like that framework.
Yeah.
I think something's already gone wrong here.
Yeah.
I think you can do it really badly, but I don't know if you can do it good in a way where everybody, and I know there's cases where
Honorable.
it actually goes well.
Yeah, right. That's what they're meaning by it.
They mean,
yes.
and they're hoping that there's a way I can teach them to do it.
Yeah.
Everyone leaves happy. And I'm like, no, this
That's
is
not going to happen.
It's going to be a bad day for everybody. So the third category, what was that one?
Yeah, we talked about decisions are hard when you just don't know or can't control the outcome.
Yeah.
There's just a level of we don't know. This is what we think. And it feels like we've done our best work to make the decision, but there's still a level of we have to pull the trigger. We have to make the jump. And we just don't know if we're going to land on our feet or what the outcome's going to be. We think we know, but there are factors outside of our control.
Right.
And I think when there are more factors outside of our control, I think we feel those decisions are hard.
They are hard.
Because we want to believe we can control.
Yeah.
And there is an element of there are things we kind of can control. We can predict more accurately than others.
But then by definition, those ones aren't as hard.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
That's why we love to have data, right? We do our due diligence, because sometimes we're actually able to figure out how to make the right decision.
Yeah.
And if you can let data and information and things like that identify the right decision from the wrong decision, then by God, make the right decision.
Yeah, exactly.
But that becomes easy. The data made the decision. But when you've done all that and it still isn't clear and you still have to make a decision, you're entering into an uncertainty that is just harder to live
Right.
with, because you're going to own the decision. You're going to make it, or we're going to make it. And then whatever happens next is going to unfold.
Yeah.
You're going to get feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. And those decisions could be a number of things, right? I remember we were approached by a very large company that we would love to do business with. They're an investment firm who everyone knows their name. They're on commercials. And they approached us and they wanted us to give them a request or for proposal. They asked us for that, and we threw our hat in the ring and we bid. And they actually said, "Hey, listen, you're our top contender because we've heard about your reputation. We really want you. We're just doing our due diligence, bringing others in." But they're basically saying, "Hey, we're teeing this up for you. It's yours to lose." But it came down to a moment where they needed us to. They needed us to. Basically, they wanted to give all of our employees their corporate laptops to do the work. And we don't do that. We have our own systems, and it's for part of our unique service advantage, part of how we were able to demonstrate to go, listen, we're not independent. We're not a rogue firm. We actually quantify our work. And one of the ways we demonstrate that is we have supervisors who know what our employees are doing. We can measure that work. If you put us on your devices, then we don't have any ability to control and monitor because we don't have the insight we need.
Oh,
You're
lose
taking
track of your quality.
It's your
advantage.
network, not ours. So
Yeah.
we can't. So we actually had to make a hard decision and to say no.
Yeah.
Not knowing what that would do on a lot of levels. I mean, they could smear our name, which chances are they wouldn't do that, but that's a potential.
Yeah.
You burn a bridge.
Yeah.
Or you lose a big account that can turn into a lot of money, and you don't know what other accounts are going to drop next month. So it's like there's this fear of loss at play. Interesting enough, that company ended up coming back to us, and they're willing to negotiate a year or two later, maybe a way to collaborate in that, because
Yeah.
they do recognize they want us.
Yeah.
But that wasn't even knowing they would come back to us there either. You know?
No. Those are
Those are hard decisions.
they're just hard. And so when you think about when the stakes are high, there's often people involved, but when that becomes a really significant, when the impact on people is going to be significant, and when you don't know if you're making the right decision, and you probably can't know, you've done the work to figure out if there was a right answer. Now you've just got to go forward into the unknown. One of those things seems to make these things hard. So we were talking about this, and you're like, Kirk, but there's something worse than even that.
That's right.
I'm like, worse than that?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
The hardest decision.
The hardest. And I'm like, what is that? And you're like, when all three apply.
Yeah.
And I started to think back across the landscape of difficult decisions I've had to make, and of course, all three have always applied. When you mix that up together, you get to these, what I would call, they feel like impossible decisions. And it's where you can watch a leader almost melt under the weight of it, or get paralyzed. And those are the ones where I think great leaders really do stand out. Mm-hmm. And when you watch somebody in that circumstance navigate it well, get themselves to that spot, and then still move forward, I'm generally impressed by whatever they do.
Right.
Because there isn't a right answer. In one guy's framework, I don't even know the name of the book anymore, but he had this one line, and he said, sometimes you can figure out through due diligence what is the right decision. And we all want to make right decisions. But when you can't, you have to make a decision and then work to make it right.
Yeah, that's good.
And I was like, that's interesting. Now, of course, you can also need to recognize when it was actually wrong and pivot. That's, also involved in that idea.
Yeah.
But I think when I watch people that we respect, and I think most of the world's heroic leaders probably were doing that on a different level.
Right.
And my experience with this so far is that it's exhausting, it's heavy, and it's the hardest part of leadership. And I think it's often the part that people fail to recognize is coming, and they don't do the work to prepare themselves for it. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that we make leaders wait and put their time in. There's a reason that we don't give them all the toys when they're young. We are trying to figure out who will be trustworthy with those moments.
Yeah.
And when we put someone in a position and they're not ready, it crushes them, or they make really bad decisions.
Yeah. And I think an important piece in hard decisions is, there's a few things we can probably do to approach those best. Mm-hmm. But one is to just ask the timing question in it too. Because some hard decisions need to be made now.
Right. And
if you know it needs to be made now, how you lead through that is going to be different than if you know you have some time. I know there have been times where I've got a people decision that's a really hard decision. It may be that I've got this person who I know now is starting to show signs that the company's outgrowing them in their seat. It's back to that last example I'm using. But the company has other issues at hand that cause this hard decision to be prioritized not as the now decision, it might be the next decision.
Right. There's something else going on, right?
Yeah, and even then it's not set by a date, it's a condition that when this happens and I feel comfortable here, then we can tackle that. Because if we tackle this out of time, it actually creates potentially more difficult decisions.
Yeah, there's a cascading
effect.
Yeah.
So there's this dance you make too, which I think is a leadership principle and how you go after it. But just because you have a decision to make and it's hard, ripping the Band-Aid off isn't always the best thing to do in the moment. Sometimes it is.
That's right.
Sometimes you actually need to leave it because we know we've got more work to do here, and right now this is the best situation we have for the moment.
We use the line all the time when we're talking about conflict and conflict resolution. We say people are always trying to avoid conflict as a strategy, right?
Yeah.
We go, no, you cannot avoid conflict. You can only store it, which is how I heard that delivered first. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But then I've added the line, And some conflict needs to be stored for a while.
Right.
Right. That idea. It's okay if you're storing
Yes.
conflict. I'll get back to that. Right now, I don't have the energy, the resources, the time, or it's the wrong conflict to address first. Right. And so, yeah, it's a timing question. And a lot of this, I think that's what, when we talk about these hard decisions, I think conflict is usually involved in the middle of it. And it's conflict between competing good ideas, there's an internal dilemma happening. And being able to navigate through that and bring resolution to whatever's going on is not about having the right answer. It's about how we navigate through that to bring resolution to this conflict that usually is causing some kind of tension or pulling at us in an ineffective way.
Right.
So one of the things that I think is critical for people who are on a leadership journey to recognize is that the further up you go in a hierarchy, the more power, authority, and responsibility you carry, which is what leaders carry, the more of these you're going to run into. In fact, we start to set them aside for you. In fact, the further you go up, the less likely you are to even encounter a decision that's easy to make. And at some point, you just end up dealing with the impossible decisions. Right. We need to prepare ourselves for that, strengthen ourselves, become resilient to it so that we can interact with more and more of the ambiguity and challenges of reality as it is.
Yeah.
And the stronger we get at that, the more likely we are to be put in these situations. And Patrick Lincicone has a book called The Motive, which is a great little allegory that he tells. But that's one of the central learnings that comes out of it is I'm way paraphrasing. I'm not doing the book justice when I say it this way. But basically what he's saying is the reason that we pay some of these leaders so much and give them private jets and corner offices, all these perks, is not because it's the best job in the company. It's because it's actually the worst job in the company. And most people who are grasping for that kind of power and think, if only I could be in charge at that level, I could fix everything, right? Need to understand that, no, it's actually the hardest job in the world.
Yeah.
And we will only give it to people who have demonstrated trustworthiness in an ideal situation.
Right. Yeah, totally.
There's anomalies to that.
Yeah. Well, and in the process of making decisions, especially the harder decisions, the process of making a good decision, I don't think changes.
Right.
It's just how you weight the process, the value you give to the process. But this idea of, the decision is usually the result of a process of having identified a real issue, which we know usually the presenting issue isn't the issue. If it's a people person issue, there's usually something underneath that you're going down deep. Why to get to the real root.
What's going on?
This
here?
is the symptom, but this is the thing.
Yep.
And then from there, you're going to take the time to kind of collaborate. If you have a core team, this is a good time to pull them in because it is a hard decision. And you actually get buy-in, you get insight, you get perspective. You get all the people who see things from a different point of view so that you're not out on your own winging it. Not that you don't have the right to do it as a senior leader if that's your job. I mean, yeah, we can play that ace of spade anytime we want. But man, save it for when you need to play it. If you have a team, sometimes they're going to give you insight where you make a better decision as a result of identifying, collaborating, and gathering the information you need, which is typically the basic process to making good decisions.
Right.
And then you make the decision as a result of
executing the process.
So
we started with the question, or why are some decisions so hard to make? Because there's no right answer, and it's not safe.
Yeah.
And you have to do it anyway. And we reserve those for our best leaders. So if you find yourself in the position where you're being asked to make one of those, you might think, wow, they might trust me.
Yeah.
But now you have to make it.